Hey everyone, it's Berry. We're back from a short holiday break, so Happy New Year! If you've been around on my channel since the beginning, you'll know that I am an avid Dungeons & Dragons fan. Some of my first videos were D&D character concepts, commissions, and fan art. They're not great videos, let's be honest. But my Molly Muck fan art is still one of my favorite paintings to date. So I thought I'd get back to those roots today with some more fan art. This time of Ginny D's Ashling. Ginny recently posted a Get Ready With Me style video for Ashling's winter look and posted some photos on Twitter, and as soon as I saw them, I needed to paint Ashling. Oh my gosh, her hair is so pretty. I'm not terribly great at drawing expressions. It's something that I need to practice more. And this half smirk, but like actually genuinely kind of a pleasant smile in Ginny's photo was something that I really wanted to try to capture. So I pretty heavily referenced the photo, but I also interpreted it into my own style and took some artistic license in things like the shapes of the hair and how that flowed. The asymmetry of the twigs bothered me a lot, and I really wanted to add extra twigs on the right side so that it would be symmetrical, but I figured, like, Ginny put them there on purpose. I'm gonna quell my need to make things symmetrical. I also forgot to film for the first bit of this, but we'll pick back up with the other side of the hair later, so you'll see how it's done. I went back to watercolors for this one. For some reason, I was just really drawn to watercolor over using gouache. Watercolor paintings do tend to go a bit quicker, and I was on a little bit of a timeline for this. And watercolor also lends itself to a more airy quality, if that makes sense. Watercolor paintings to me read a little bit more storybook rather than the, like, matte opacity of gouache, which can be very modern illustration-esque. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that in a way that makes sense at all. The vibrant blues and greens in the Jane Davenport's Brights palette were perfect for the evergreen colors in Ashling's winter hair. For the shadows in the hair, I actually used the indigo color in the Jane Davenport palette to create the depth that I wanted. When you darken a color, it can be helpful to also shift the hue a little bit more towards blue or purple to further emphasize that depth. It also creates a little bit more visual interest, so an object looks less stale and monochromatic. And it can make the object appear less dull and muddy than it had been if you tried to paint shadows with just black. Depending on your lighting situation, you can also go kind of crazy with the shadows and make them like red or something, but that isn't something that was going to work here. So I stuck with blue. For the warm skin tones, I used the Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors, which is a beginner's palette. I struggle a bit with the paints in this palette. I don't find that they're the highest quality. They have a lot of binder and they don't tend to flow across the page very well. And I struggle with activating some of the pans. Especially the sap green. For whatever reason, that color does not want to come out of the pan and onto the brush. But it has always been my go-to for painting skin tones. Between the cadmium red, the yellow ochre, and the burnt sienna and burnt umber, I find that it covers basically the whole range of skin tones you could possibly need. And until I'm able to replace all of those colors with professional variety, I think I'm gonna stick with this for skin tones. The Cotman palette and the Jane Davenport Brights palette, in my opinion, together are the ultimate beginner's duo. They complement each other so well, because you have all of the warm skin tones that you find in the Cotman palette, and then you also have all of these bright, bold colors in the Jane Davenport palette. The highlights in the hair I left totally white by painting a few loose strokes around a white area to give it the impression of strands of hair. Basically, I left the highlights as negative space, because the white of the paper is the brightest white that you can possibly achieve. But I did mess this up in a couple of places, so I went back with some white Posca pen just for a few things. If you forget to put the highlight somewhere, you can always use a white gel pen or a white Posca pen or some white paint and paint it back in. It's not that big of a deal. I just prefer using the white of the paper for that. One little thing that I feel like I always struggle with in watercolor is capturing the right value range in the face. Especially since paint tends to dry a little bit lighter and less bold than it is when it's wet, I always tend to place down a little bit of paint and then get scared of how dark it is on the paper. And instead of doing what I should do, which is just to let the paint be and let it dry, and then if I need to, I can adjust my other values to compensate, I always get scared and I wipe some of it back up and try to make it a little bit lighter because I'm scared that I just put down too much paint. I try to be a little bit more conscious of that here and lean in a bit more into those rosy reds of the cheeks and the shadows around the eyes, but I think I was still a bit too light-handed. It's just something for me to keep practicing. Let me know, what's something that you struggle with when you paint? So here's my finished winter Ashland portrait. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more speed paints, make sure you're subscribed and notified of new uploads. And you can keep watching me paint more things right here. Thank you so much for watching and take care.